Gonna let everybody know here. Okay, send now. And gonna hop over here for just a minute. And let's make sure, hello to anybody dipping in. I just want to make sure that our audio is sounding good and everything. Just give me a second. Okay. I think everything's in order. So, okay. Hello. Gonna give people some time to come in. So today what I'm gonna be doing is gonna be going through this Silent Hill 2 HD playthrough. It's about, what is it? We have 3 hours and 43 minutes. I'm not gonna be going through the entirety of that. I'll be going from the beginning of the video to the end, so I'll make it through the playthrough, but not gonna be going the full 4 hours. I'm gonna be skipping around a little bit. So I'll have my fingers on the J, K, and L keys, and gonna be scrubbing through this timeline. And yeah, so what I'm gonna be doing today is going through it and speculating and sort of hypothesizing how some of the things that we're seeing might have been programmed. So kind of like speculating on the nuts and bolts of it, what's going on underneath the hood. Maybe we'll get to some theory designy things. You know, I might put my 2 cents on things. I'm gonna try not to. I think mostly what I want to focus on here is yeah, just sort of like lessons we can learn for like how generic and how sort of broad a lot of programming can be between a lot of different games. So hopefully this is an ongoing series where you guys can see that like not much changes between like no matter like Silent Hill or Mario Kart. It's like a lot of the design concepts are gonna be the same. Steven, long time no stream. Indeed. What's up, Athir Entertainment? How's it going? How you doing? Welcome. Yeah, so gonna be going through this, and then yeah, I would love to answer questions as we're going through it. So anybody in the chat, please feel free to you know, ask how what do you think of this, or what do you think of that, or if you have any questions about what you might be seeing on screen. A lot of you already know your shit. A lot of you are actual game devs who spend plenty of time doing these things. But nonetheless, I do encounter the occasional, or not the occasional, I do regularly encounter people being like, how can I do this? How can I do that? And to me, it's always just like, well, it's just like that and that combined or something. Hopefully that makes sense. But let's get to it. Don't have, it's like 4:44 right now. Okay, cool. So hopefully I'm coming in loud and clear. Also, please let me know how the video audio is coming through. I'm gonna try to lower it just a tad, but you know, I don't want it to be particularly loud, but tell me if it's too low. So yeah, so I can talk over it at least, right? We don't want it to over, you know, I want you to hear what I'm saying more than what's happening too much in the video, but don't want it to be too low either. Okay, so let's do this. By the way, full disclosure, never played Silent Hill 2. It's always really intrigued me. So there's gonna be a lot of spoilers in here for me and for probably other people watching, but I don't think that's gonna matter too much. I think for all the skipping around that we're gonna do,
something happened to you?
For all the skipping around that we're gonna do, I don't think it's gonna be that spoilery.
Are you confusing?
Okay, so right off the bat, what are we doing? We're starting with the cutscene, and the first thing I'm noticing honestly is that it's pre-rendered. Right, so like I'm just seeing that like the way they're moving and the lighting and everything. I know this doesn't quite line up with what the rendering expectations are for the console it's out on. And I realize this is an HD, that maybe it's a remaster or maybe this is an emulator kind of thing, but I can tell that this is whatchamacallit, pre-rendered. KH says, Steven! What's up? What's up, KH? Welcome. Okay, so I'm gonna skip through some of this pre-rendered stuff. In fact, what I would like to do too is let's take a screenshot. So it's like this, right? Let's take this and we'll compare it later, right? So we'll have this on hand and we'll compare it to what we find later on. Okay. So geez, 5 minutes of opening stuff, huh? Okay, so this is starting to look closer to game graphics now, right? So you can already hopefully you guys can tell. You've got to be able to tell, right? Like who can't tell at this point, right? You look at these two things side by side, right? So you can already see that there's like a bunch of post-processing stuff right now. Like, let me see. Like just the way these edges are, like you can see that there's kind of like blooming and like a sort of blurriness. The image quality in general is not as crisp, right? When I zoom in on this one, you'll see that there's much sharper edges, like all along right here is like much sharper. You can actually see like the polygons, right? Like you can see the edges of the polygons on this. Like there's a corner, there's a corner, there's a corner. There's like a couple corners here, right? So each of these is vertices. So probably what's happening under the hood here is you're probably looking at like a mesh that looks like this, right? Where it's like each of these is a vertice, right? Something like that. So this is actually really squared off probably. Whereas this is like, look how crazy smooth that is, right? So already off the bat, we're kind of like committing to like really high expectations of like the graphical fidelity. But I guess that was a thing back in the day, right? It was just like, if we're doing story points, who cares? When is your new course coming out, bro? Dude, soon. I got caught up with a lot of life stuff, but it's coming out. I'm really wrapping it up this month, so hopefully it could be launched at the start of next month. I know I said this month before, but yeah. Okay, so check it out. Look at, so here's something interesting, right? Is like, just a sec. Where is it? Right here. So mirror stuff. So the thing is, does anybody in chat have any experience with making mirrors in their game? Because I think mirrors can be a really interesting topic that like, there's just so many different ways to do it. It kind of depends on like what you expect out of it. But in this case, what's interesting is like, back in the day, a really common method for creating mirrors, because you couldn't actually put a material on a mirror, right? So like all these are materials, right? You have this like grungy wall texture material, you have these like this tile material, right? You have the metal pipe material, but like this part, the mirror, there's some like overlay of it, like you can see the little rust and like the kind of like smudges and dirtiness of it that's like on top, but the actual reflectiveness of it, that's kind of a different thing. Where like, how do you like how are you going to render the same thing sort of twice? It was an old problem that wasn't easily solved in real time. For pre-rendered stuff, it was a little easier. It was still computationally really expensive to render the same image twice but like on a thing. But like what you ended up doing back in the day was actually you would have a separate room. So like, this is actually like a hole in the wall, right? And actually on the other side, you have like a full body of this guy. So his shoulder continues off here, right? And his body continues down here, and he has like feet down here or whatever, right? So it's like, you can imagine him behind this wall. And it would just be that the controls would be inverted. So from above, it might look like your player's right here facing this way, and in the mirror you have like another duplicate, right? So if your player moves this way, it sort of keeps those controls but like inverted, and it makes your doppelganger, your little mirror guy, move that same way, right? So that was like a really common way to do reflections. Nowadays we just have cool little probes that you throw in the scene, and it creates a material that actually can create reflections. Still computationally expensive. We don't put them everywhere in games. You'll still find modern games don't really commit to the full mirror thing, or they'll kind of do little weird things where like the mirror's foggy or kind of has like other screen space reflections. Like there's lots of tricks. But this was a really common one back in the day, and I can imagine that if it wasn't for this remakey kind of HD remaster thing that we're watching right now, the old one may have committed to this double wall scenario, right? Also, I think it's really funny watching old games having like the characters really slide around a lot. Like all the walk animations you see, that's where we get the idea of like video game walking, when they're like walking into a wall and they're just kind of sliding and moonwalking. I actually still really appreciate that in modern games. Like Dark Souls even has like very slidey animations, and Elden Ring and everything, and it's just sort of like nature of the beast. We're gonna skip through some of this. Another thing that I'm noticing too is like you could see like look at all like the edges of these trees. You know, like just how low poly everything is, but still like has such great design sense. It's a lot of fog going through the scene. So the fog in the scene that I'm seeing right now, something I might kind of like, something I can speculate on is that like, that it might be that you can't see it in a freeze frame, right? You can only see it as it's going by. But I imagine that what's happening is like, if you look at this scene right here, in like a in a top-down view, if you look at this wall as like this, right, this little wall he's standing by, and this car is like right here, and then the trees are back here, I think what might be happening is that like they have a plane or potentially like some type of particle system that's emitting images of fog across between you and the camera, right? So if the camera is like right here, by the way, is this showing up? I want to make sure that I'm not too, I can't tell how far ahead that is, but anyways, yeah, if this is not showing up on stream, let me know. But yeah, like if you see this as a plane of fog texture and all it has to do is like slide across, right? And so here's the camera, you know, we're looking this way, and then just everything slides in between here. And again, it could be particles, so it could be a bunch of little flat boards like this that each have a texture of fog on it, and they're all just kind of going this way. Or it could just be one giant plane that has, like if you look at it like this, if it just sits right in front of the camera, and then we have like a fog texture on it, and then you do like UV sliding. So like as long as the texture is like tileable, maybe we could bring up, let's see, like UV slides, slide image. This is not what I expected. 3D. Or tiling, maybe. I don't really know how to get like a good visual for this. But yeah, essentially it's kind of like, you know, you can imagine this brick texture right here. If it's on a cube, you can move it around. And so you could do a very similar thing with like your fog effects or whatever. So you can have a single plane and then be sliding this map across. Okay. Let's see. Just hanging out a lot, huh? Okay. Something here is interesting too. Wow, it just like cuts to this other camera angle. So I don't know. I kind of do wish I was playing this game because I'd be able to kind of fool around a little bit more with it. But do you see this? When he moves to the left, the camera's moving exactly with him in the left. So like if you took a picture of this, right? Or I don't even have to take a picture, watch. So I'll put my mouse on him, right? I'll put my mouse right here. And if I press play, or let's put my mouse on him now. And now I press play. He more or less stays center of the screen. Did you see that? Like, he's basically still center of the screen the whole time. Like right here where he was. He probably has like the tiniest bit of wiggle room. But essentially he's staying center screen, and I think that the camera is probably following wherever the player goes. So if he would have walked back that way, the camera would have locked on him. But you'll see that the camera booms down. It's like craning down, right? See how it's getting lower to the floor there, and then here it just switches to another camera entirely. So like that kind of situation, it might be that like you have something like this, which is that. Basically, they say, I'm trying to think of like what might be the best thing. There's probably like checkpoints. So like as the character's moving between like here and here, right? Only on this axis, right? So we have like 3 axes here. the camera's probably only really reading it. The game's probably only really reading it in terms of like how far left or right he is, right, on this axis. And the closer he gets this way, the closer he is to cutting to the camera. So it's like he probably has like a bounds. So this could either be a distance thing, right, where they have a little thing that says, you know, check, like this is an actual, like in Unity, you might say that this right here is like a game object, and the designers can hand place it there and say when he is, say, like the player's position, right, the player's vector 3, or not even the vector 3, right, the player distance is less than I don't know, whatever, like units, maybe they say like, you know, 1.5 or something from this, right? So like this distance between the player and this thing, then cut to the other camera, right? Then cut to the other view. But if it's greater than, then you stay in this view right here in this camera. And all the way over here, there's kind of like nothing, just the player. There's probably a big invisible wall right here, I imagine. Maybe not. Maybe you can go over here. Maybe it would switch another camera angle or something. But yeah, essentially like switching cameras could be based off of the distance. And then the other way that you could do it is by making colliders. So it could really just be that the player's like in this big box that looks probably like this. And let's like maybe bring it out a little bit. Right? So the player's in this big box, and as soon as the player exits the box, it cuts to the other camera. So only when the player's in this box is it in this view that we're currently in. You know, it might be like that. There's, again, it could be the distance one, it could be this collider, it could be the inversion of this collider thing. It could be that there's actually a box right here, and that when the player enters that's when it cuts to the other camera. But that's how you could do it, right? And I think the whole panning up and down thing, that's probably more, not panning, but the camera going up and down, booming up and down, could be more tied to this distance thing, right? Because then what you have is a number that you can tie to another number, which is like the player's distance and how high the camera is. And it's like the further away the player is from that spot, then the higher the camera goes. Or the closer the player is to that spot, the lower the camera goes, right? So hopefully that makes sense, right? See him moving there, and then we cut to this camera. This specific generation of games will remain always an inspiration to the game dev industry. Absolutely. And even as somebody who didn't play a lot of these games, or like particularly like finished them too, like I've touched a handful of these, and probably like in my later years, I didn't even get to play them that much when I was younger. Like I tried a handful of the Resident Evil games when I was younger and stuff, but they're still just really influential on like design tropes, both mechanical and like you know, art assets and stuff like that. Absolutely super important in the history of game development. Okay, so check this out. This is kind of interesting too. So we just went from this is definitely, I want to say this is definitely all 3D. I'm pretty sure this is all 3D. Like these are actually, I might be wrong. I would be very curious to see what the reality of this is. I imagine that this is all genuinely 3D models like we're typically used to, because the alternative is that these are all images, that this is just one flat image, and it's like, it's literally this. It's literally like if I screenshotted this, and then in the game, there's an invisible box that represents the car that's like this, right? Because one game that I know did that for sure is Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. They had this kind of setup where it was like pre-rendered images that like you get no parallaxing on, right? You can't look at it from different angles. And it's hard for me to tell right now because as the camera was moving around, I wasn't necessarily seeing any parallax. I wasn't necessarily, you know, the car door right here, when the camera moves around it, it wasn't necessarily that like any more or less was revealed of it, right? Because like if I show you this water bottle, if I move it over here, you could see the barcode now, right? I'm not twisting the bottle. it's just at an angle to you now. But if I move it again this way, the barcode is obstructed, right? And that's not me doing this. I'm not twisting it. It's literally just its position relative to your like sort of center point of view or whatever. And so that's parallax, right? Parallax is when you can see different angles of things based off of your position relative to them. In this, when I'm watching this playback, I'm kind of like, I see some of that in the top view right here. I feel like I could see that door kind of moving down. But this one, it's hard to say. Regardless, that was one way to do things, right? Like potentially if this is an image that's just baked on. I think the original Resident Evil had a lot of that. That's why they're fixed cameras, because the original Resident Evil pre-rendered their backgrounds. So they got to make them look super pretty, have really nice lighting and stuff. A lot of old games did this. And then they just put in these invisible colliders. And the only thing that was actually 3D would be like the character model, right? Because the budget for the polygons would be so limited. They're like, well, if there's one thing that needs to be actual 3D and move around and more dynamic, then we'll just make it the player, right? And then they would just bump into these invisible boxes and stuff. So that's just something that stood out to me. And right now, when the player goes over to it, it pauses, it like freezes here, and then it fades out. And then it fades in, and this fucking thing is definitely pre-rendered, right? Can you see the difference? Am I crazy here? Like, do you guys see this difference? This is definitely pre-rendered. You could see all these like little let's fucking screenshot this shit. You could see all these little specular highlights on it, right? Like this right here. Look at all the edge right here. This little highlight in here. This could be baked in, but just generally based off of like how soft the edges get over here, they look more reminiscent of that opening scene, right? Like those opening screenshots that I took. Remember how her edges were really soft? This kind of has a lot of that to it. And also just like, man, I feel like a big giveaway, again, this is just speculation, is, what do I use to drag this? I forget. Okay, so like right here, the paper, where the paper is resting on the seat, you could see on the edge down here, wherever the source of light is, you could see these sort of what we'd call like contact shadows. So it's like there's a tiny little edge, you see this, where it gets extra dark right here, where you don't see it over here, you kind of see it right here, you don't really see it right here, you can kind of start seeing little glimmers of it over here, but essentially contact shadows were like fucking impossible in older engines and in older game rendering, so like that's something you would want to pre-render and fake, because contact shadows add a sort of level of fidelity and like realism to it. So if I get rid of all this bullshit, yeah, you can see these kind of contact shadows, and I feel like for me that's sort of a giveaway. I mean, other than just like at first glance I'm like, that's pre-rendered, that's one of the giveaways, right? So it's just interesting that they go to this, because next, what do we have here? If I play this, he just says he got a map, right? So it cuts to his point of view, and then look, the map like fades away. So it's like, what's interesting here is like you could even see the shadows like fading with it. And it's like, it's not like the map moves, right? It's not like a hand goes in and grabs it. It's not like there's any dynamic aspect to it all. It just fades away, right? So that's kind of like another clue to like, okay, this is pre-rendered. And it's like, that's an interesting design decision, right? To just kind of like give you a better view of what the character is apparently dealing with. Okay, and then we just come back out after, right? It's kind of like a little throwaway moment. Okay, cut to another camera angle, and it's just following, the camera's like following the player. Looks like he's tired for a second, right? Play a little tired animation. Tired animation could be as simple as like, you have a number that while the player is running, that you have like some, like imagine like a stamina bar, right? Like you could just see it as a number as well, like full being 100 and empty being 0. So while the player is running, as soon as the player is running, it turns on a different system, a little separate system that makes a number start going down from 100 to 0. And as soon as it reaches some threshold, or maybe even all the way until 0, maybe it depletes really fast or something. If it ever reaches that, it says, hey, if you ever stop running, then play this animation instead of your normal animation when you're standing still. So you might have these two animations, one of just standing still, which we see right here, right? Versus the one where he's kind of like heaving, right? You see him like, he's like breathing. Super simple, like really easy way to kind of make your world feel alive. Let's see what else we got. Okay. I should put the volume up because I imagine there might be some. Boom. Do you see that move? Look at that move. Look how it's kind of awkward, but it's kind of interesting. Like, I'll slow it down. So, right here, and then I'll slow it down to 0.25. So as soon as like the camera hits this like branch, basically, the camera like goes, whoa, I better like turn around and face this other direction. See, we're kind of hitting this branch. He's about to like be obstructed. Camera like, and it zooms out too. It changes its focal length, and then it starts following him, actually. That's interesting. Or does it start following? Yeah, it looks like it's following him. Yeah, that's interesting. It's not quite the normal follow, though. It's not like following him one-to-one like if you were playing sort of a lot of other third-person games. Like, I don't know why the first one that comes to mind, like Zelda or Mario, Gears of War, MGS, any of those kind of things, is like the camera's like has a sort of locked relative position, and the character might have some wiggle room within this little like space, but this one looked almost as if it was on rails. It looked like maybe what could be happening, if I could just use this as empty space, that in Silent Hill, maybe it's that like if you have a ground that like, let me get a black color. If you have like a road that kind of winds like this, right? If this is the path that the player is on, that if this is the player, right, and they're going this way, then the camera, if it wanted to, normally if it just stayed locked behind them, they would always be kind of like a little pair that's like they're the same every way. Like that's how it is in a lot of games, right? But it seems like in Silent Hill, the way it was going was that there might be these little nodes, there might be little checkpoints. So it's like one right here, one right here, one right here, here, here. And what the camera is doing is sort of like interpolating between them, right? It's sort of smoothly going from here to here. It's like a linear thing. So it just goes here, and then once it gets here, if the player keeps going towards this one, then it starts going to this one, and then this one. And so it ends up creating this really straight path that's more like while the player is, on a more sort of organic and sort of windy, right? Like a curve, right? A more curved path. Do you see that? Do you see this thing? Like, let's see. Like this. So watch. You'll see that the camera, you see these moves that it's doing? It's like it goes straight to something. And even right now, it's like slowly going to another thing, and then it turned. And what that creates is like a really cinematic feel, right? Like that's not a super dynamic video gamey feel. Instead, that's closer to what we expect at a cinema, which is like a dolly track, right? Like when we're shooting movies, we put a camera on like a dolly. It's like literally rails, like a little, you can imagine like a little train track or roller coaster, and it moves straight along them. Sometimes they're curved, but they're usually a very rigid sort of system. And it looks like that's how this might have been done. There might be like a lot of little nodes that this camera is going back and forth between two. It doesn't look like there's a lot of freedom for the camera. All right, and that's like a really intentional way of like controlling the sort of the feel of your game. Super funny. I mean, just look how low lift it is. You get to this, and it just fades out, plays a sound effect, plays back in. Never animates the game. It's very like economical of just like why show it? Let's just kind of give the impression. Which again, it's like it was definitely a restraint of the developers, like a technical thing, but adds, adds like a vibe to everything. Another thing here too is this is something that Silent Hill's famous for. Even as somebody who's like not like the huge Silent Hill fan, or I don't know like a shit ton of things about it. This is actually what it's really famous for, is the fog. So right now, the draw distance, or not even necessarily the draw distance, just the sort of, it's not volumetric either. I don't know what this kind of fog is called, but it's like, it's basically just drawn off the distance of things. It's kind of like what we would call Z buffer, I think that's what you call it. Like, just like, it's basically like the depth between the camera and the depth like rendered by the camera. I'm not quite saying this right, but essentially what's happening here is like this fog is very uniform, because fog in real life is sort of clumpy and noisy, and sort of like sometimes it's a little thicker around some areas, and it's like, because it's like particles, it's literally like our atmosphere that's changing, right? And it's like water in that way. In water there's sort of like waves, and fog is almost kind of like, it's kind of like a cloud, which it's not sort of homogeneous, it's not even. But in video games, a cheap way to do that is just to be like, well, generally we know that like the way we perceive fog is like how light travels through it, right? Because like you have, like if you look at it like this, you might have like you here, right? And then, your vision is like that, you're looking that way. And the object you're looking at is like right here, right? Now, normally on a non-foggy day, you'd see it just fine, right? But what fog is doing is it's putting all these little clouds in front of things, and it's making it so that all the little photons that are supposed to be bouncing off of this and reaching your eyes, right? Because that's all seeing shit is little photons. It's like light bouncing off of things, and it's like, okay, I'm registering that that's there. But when there is fog in between things, what you end up with is like a net, or like a little spider web that catches the photons, right? So the more of this shit that it has to go through, the fewer photons reach your eyes, right? So it's like from a really far distance, you're gonna see even less, right? Because it has to go through even more fog. If the thing was like right here, you might be able to see it faintly, because at least some of the little photons would get through, right? But the further it goes this way, the more it has to get through all of this fog shit. And all the photons get trapped there, and eventually you can't see anything, right? It's just, there's so much of it. It's just, that's what dense fog is like. So what's cool is that in video games, the way you could fake that, the way you could fake the impression of fog, is literally just say, change the clarity of something based off of its distance, like just its distance alone. And I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that for sure, but like that's the thing that like kind of Silent Hill is sort of famous for. What's one of the things it's famous for, is that it uses fog in like a really effective, like moody way, and like that kind of helps with like the budgeting of performance stuff, because that means you don't have to render things outside of the foggy distance, right? So as he's getting closer, look how it's like a linear fall off, right? It's like literally with each step he takes, as we get closer, with each little, step, look at it literally just starts fading in, and it's very linear. It's very just the same. You'll see each row of gravestones come in at the same time. And that's just kind of like old school fog systems. It's honestly still how we do it a lot of these days. Like most game engines will come with that kind of out of the box.
Maybe.
No. Okay, so this is like a.
And it's not just
This is
fog.
not pre-rendered, but still in-game cutscene, right? So it's a little different. It's like they still have the animations plugged in. They're still setting up multiple camera angles, and they're just cutting back and forth between them.
Dangerous or not.
Right, because you could see even here, like the textures of it, this is not as high fidelity as the pre-rendered cutscenes were. Okay, so we're just gonna skip ahead more. Take a look at that. Look at when he's running. Look at the jarring nature between when he's running and then when he stops running. Right there. It's not too jarring. It feels a little jarring when it's playing. The camera definitely feels much more free in this space, like it's actually following him. It might have even been like that in the other thing. It might have just been the fact that he was on a road. But there was something about sort of like how jagged the camera movements felt when he was on this road. But look at that fog. Look at, like, it's literally just like, it's so just linear from this. Another thing too, what's actually interesting is that, like, the fog, it is kind of rendering straight up and down, even though the camera is at an angle. So, like, so in this scene, you have, let's say the fog line is right here, right? Let's say this is where it really starts transitioning. And you can almost see it like it's a wall, right? But the thing is, the camera is sort of tilted down. So if it was sort of fogging things up as like a direct correlation to like the camera's like angle, that would be different, because then you would see some of the ground that's like, some lower things would get foggier quicker. But you can see this tree up here is just as foggy as down here, right? But if it was at an angle to the camera, and since the, like, if you look at it like this, like if you look at it like, here's the camera, right? It's kind of angled down, right? And then here's the player running this way, and then here's a tree. You would kind of imagine that, like, if it was just based off of distance, that you have this kind of shape, and so that things up here would kind of get fogged up at a different time than things down here, right? Because if you cut this box down here, or like right here, right, this would be fogged up, but, or actually no, all of this would be fogged up and this would be clear. I hope that makes sense. But instead, what it actually seems like, it's just being drawn off of distance. So it's literally like, even though the camera's angled over here, it's saying that, well, between us there's this much space, and that it's drawing a fog distance on the distance of the camera instead. He just picked up a chainsaw. It's just stuck in there. Oh, look, there's like some particles right there, right? There's a little particle system. There's also a lot, besides like the fog I was just explaining, there's also a lot of this particle fog. There's for sure particle fog. You can see it all right here, right? It's like pretty smoky, actually. Yeah. A lot of walking around. Okay, what do we got here? Just picked up a first aid kit, just like based off a distance, or maybe there was a collider there. Pulling up the map, button for your map that just shows an image, right? All we're doing is looking at an image here. Considering that this level is static, they're able to just draw the picture of the map. They don't have to like change anything in real time or anything. Let's see what else we got. Like, mechanically so far, like, I understand that there was definitely a lot of probably like graphical and more so like design innovation happening here, right? Like, I think that even when this game came out, while there might have been some technical innovation, probably, like, maybe even with the fog, and maybe even with the graphics, maybe even with like the sort of level of texture fidelity or something, there might have been technical innovations, but mostly I think Silent Hill 2, probably even at the time, was a technically like average game. I imagine. Maybe I might be wrong on that. I would like to know if anybody knows kind of like the history on like the sort of technical prowess of the game. I would be curious to know. But I imagine that it was probably pretty average, because a lot of the things happening here seem to be solely based off of like design decisions. It's still just, oh, I picked up a map. Oh, I'm looking at an item, you know, and it's playing these cutscenes. Like, we were doing this for a long time before Silent Hill, you know. Okay, so here's our first enemy. Did he like attack it? He did, right? Okay, so this is our first little moment of action. So he's picking off a piece of wood, right? So the player didn't even have to pick it up. It was just a cutscene where he grabs the wood, and now we're getting our first little moment of player action, right? Are you intending to use similar techniques on Memories of a Spy? Similar techniques for what? Which aspects? Just in general, there's probably so many really like fundamental things that I've talked about here that I'm definitely using in Memories of a Spy. But if there's any ones in specific that you're wondering about, let me know. So right here, this is what's interesting is like the player model stays looking at the enemy, right? So that adds like a little bit of character to this, right? So you can see that, look at the head of the player. If I lower the speed down, facing this way, right? But as the player like moves to the side, the character model's still looking at the monster. You see this? See, he's like walking to the side, but he's still looking over here. Which I think that's pretty cool, right? Because that's like saying that the animations, like these sort of like baked animations, are being independent from like something that's more programmatic. Again, I'm not sure how new that was at the time, but that's still like something to overcome even in modern things, right? Like there's still a little extra effort you have to put in it. Otherwise, yeah, it's just like a small detail. It's easy to achieve these days, though. We have, especially like with a lot of third-party assets, but most engines even come with options out of the box for that kind of thing. Wasn't much to that, right? He just kind of hit it. Could have been like the actual killing of that thing, you know, like, let's see if I can kind of right, like it could be that when he swung this thing, that all that really happened was that he did a sphere cast in front of him. So when the moment he swings down, that a little invisible sphere got created in front of the player, and it checked, is there anything inside the sphere? And if so, sort of do the deal damage system to it, right? That usually means just make a number go down, and then that's like a chain reaction. If the number is 0, then that means play a death animation and stuff, that kind of stuff. That's one way, is doing a little sphere cast, or even like a box cast, right? It could have just been a little invisible box that popped out in front of the player for just a second, right? Something like this. Like that, and it just checked what's inside of the box. Is there anything? And it only pops up for a split second, right? Like he's coming up here, and then right when he swings it, it probably pops up for like 2 or 3 frames, and it just checks during that time. And even the monster itself, I imagine at the time could have been one single sort of like capsule collider kind of thing. Whether or not they used capsules for that kind of stuff back in the day, I don't know. It could have been a box collider as well. It could have just been like a big thing like this, right? Like that. But I'm not really sure if there's any like body part specific hit damage on this thing. There might be, but I think that probably with this kind of thing, you would just get away with like one single collider. Otherwise, you're putting a lot of little capsule colliders and a sphere collider for the head, right? So it's like that. And a lot of little capsule colliders for the arms, like 2 for the legs, right? And then like maybe a box collider for the body. And then you could do like body part specific hit damage. Like the cutscenes, pre-rendered scenes, camera, fog, or even the way they made the mirror. The mirror is something I've been thinking about lately, because there are spots in Memories of the Spy where like there would be mirrors. There are mirrors, like put the models in there already. And I was never really sure. I was like, do I want to like spend the computational power to render that stuff, or should I do something cheap? Or we'll see. I think if I can get away with it without like asking too much of people's computers, their CPUs or GPUs, then yeah, I'll just put in like an actual reflection, like a material. Fog, there's some things I'm toying with how it works in London in Memories of the Spy. I was thinking about making it foggy at some points. No pre-rendered scenes. And no cutscenes. Memories of the Spy doesn't have any type of cutscenes. It's all just gameplay. Okay, man, look, it's just like this game really is. It's like it rests on entirely just the mood of things, right? Mechanically, it seems to be very, very simple. You move around, you hit a couple things, you move around even more, you're running around, you're walking around, you collect something, you observe something. It's so just about like being in a space, right? Like, look how much effort and energy and time went into just making this little city that they're in. Okay, what do we got here? Picking up a bottle, got a health drink. Okay. Again, too, like to the sort of picking up, like interacting with like items and stuff. That's something where it's like each object, if it is object-oriented game design or programming, that means that there's like on each object, there's probably a variable in there for like what that text is, right? So like, see, it says, I got the apartment gate key. Probably on that key, you probably have several pieces of information. So it's like, and it's like the same thing for the bottle. Oh shit. Sorry, I have my camera very precariously like mounted up here. It's probably the same thing for the bottle that they picked up, and when they picked up maybe the map might be a little different. But essentially what it probably is that each object that the player can interact with was probably the model itself, right? So you have, let's just say model, right? And so that's like the key, right? The little geometry of the key with the texture and everything. And then you probably had like the collider on it. So like where that key was when the player is able to like pick it up or something. If it was down here, if this was the key, there's a pretty good chance that it had like a collider on it to like represent like, oh, the player is at the key and now they can pick it up. And so it could have been like a sphere collider, right? Kind of like halfway sticking out through the ground. So as soon as like the player was in this sphere, then it gave the player the option to like pick up the key. Could have been a box too, right? It could have just been like a little box that's sticking up out of it. And whatever it was, now the player can pick it up. So you have the collider, the model, and then when they do pick it up, if, for sure what was attached to it, or very likely, is this text right here. I got the apartment gate key, right? So it's like, you would call this something like, there might be a variable on that object, like a script called like pickup text, right? And so you have this little formula now of how all objects work in your game, right? Because you know that there's always gonna be the model that you can see it. There's always gonna be the collider that's like around it, like how big is the thing? So it's like, do you have to be really close to it? Like where is it exactly? And then you have the text that shows up at the bottom of the screen when you pick it up. And then you kind of have like an additional thing that I think might be something like a bool, right? Like a bool value, so that like this is just true or false, right? And which is essentially just 0 or 1. So these four values are probably in every object in the game. And that last one, this bool thing, is about like when you get somewhere else in the game where you can use that item, it's like, hey, do you have this? Like, can we queue the next thing? So when you get to a door, it just says like, hey, check if you have check if gate key is true or false. And if it's false, that means you never picked it up. But if gate key is true, then that means, yeah, you can open this door, right? Or this gate, or whatever, right? So this is probably, I bet you, as we go along seeing the rest of the items, this is at least, these four values here, a framework that probably a lot of the items in the game. There might be some sort of like more esoteric situations where it's like you actually can use the item and equip it and stuff like that, but I think we'll probably end up seeing more stuff like that. It's just really crazy. It's like so much of this is just walking around. Okay. See, look how moody that is. That's so good. They got a flashlight. Did that mean that is the flashlight on? Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a flashlight like tucked in the shirt of this mannequin. I couldn't tell at first. I thought it was just the glare, like a jewelry or something. Right? Again, there's the text. I got a flashlight. That's creepy. That's a good one. That's so good. I bet you, you know, what might have been sort of innovative at the time was, like, I can imagine the animations being innovative. Particularly for sort of how, like, strangely rigged those enemy characters are. Got some dynamic shadows right there. That's cool. Oh, here's something interesting. So they go to the key. It triggers a cutscene. Come on, pick up the fucking key. Okay, and she kicks it. And steps on his fingers. Okay.
Hey, wait! Damn it.
Interesting. Okay. I saw like a little yes or no thing right now, though. What was that about? It was like, do you want to pick up the key, yes or no? Or is it, do you want to leave? No. Anyways. Holy shit, man. Yeah, you know, it's like I really do admire like the design sensibilities of this game. Like it's strong, right? It's like a strong voice. But I'm not sure I'd be able to sit down and have the patience for this kind of thing. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure how even fans of the game might say it holds up. It's too dark to tell for sure, but I think there's something on the other side of this hole. So you could treat that like very similarly, where you put a trigger around it and it just queues up a box of text, right? Oh, here we go. That's interesting. What's this about? This looked dynamic or potentially dynamic. Looks at the clock. It says this person who's playing is like rushing through this SHN survival horror network. Come on. The clock is stopped at 11:29 and 15 seconds. Okay. The faceplate is closed. It is locked. I can't. Okay, whatever. There you go. So it looks like maybe this is controlled. Yeah, the player is definitely controlling it. It's probably with the analog sticks, right? I don't know what the... If anybody in chat has played this game, I'd be curious to know if you know what the controls were for this moment, because like you have these hands, right? So the question is like, do you make it so you have to rotate it? That's like a little harder than just saying hold it in left or right or up or down, right? Because what you have to translate is a rotational value. So this is a rotational value. I guess it could be like, it could just be a number between like 1 and 360, right? Or even like 359 or whatever it is. So it's like 1 right here, and then 180 or 0 up there, 180 down here, and then like 359 right here. So you have to translate this like rotational value to the controls of your controller, right? So it's like the analog sticks. I don't know, was it for analog sticks or was it using a D-pad? Because then essentially you're saying like you either have to move left or right or up or down, and then that should just increase or decrease this value, as opposed to if you want to make it so it's like you're actually winding the thing, then there's some different programming, that there's some different like math that you have to go through to say that like you know, is this controller being sort of wound in that direction, right? That's an interesting thing. I'm not really sure how that plays out in the game, but yeah, it's interesting. Holy shit, man. Yeah, it's crazy how much is just like running around. Yeah, you can avoid all this. The fog looks cool though. Okay, some cutscenes. Some like frat bro on the toilet. Oh, what's this? Okay, reading some notes. Classic horror game. Just pick up a notebook and read some notes. Not much to it. I mean, all this shit, straight up, you could you could learn in my horror course. So in case you don't know, I have a horror course out. I mean, it's like, it's a project-based course. So it's like at the beginning, you know, we start totally from scratch. You could be a total beginner. And we go through making all these tropes of video games. So it's like making characters, making enemies, making a little spawner for the enemies, making, you know, fucking key codes and picking up keys and lock doors and little triggers to cue screams and sound effects and all sorts of stuff. But one of the things is notes. So classic one right there is just like pick up a thing and be able to read some text, right? Do some world building the old school way. Okay. All right, I gotta start like skimming through this because a lot of it's getting super samey. Let's go to these like high points on the timeline, right? Looks like a lot of people replayed this part. Okay, there's a little moment where you open the door, right? It just checks, hey, is blue door key equals true or false? Holy shit! Is this what do they call him? Pyramid Head? Is that what his name is? This doesn't seem like I am thoroughly underwhelmed by this sequence right now. And I don't know if it's different if I was playing, but the person playing even seems like, I don't know what they're doing. Did they just kill him? That's it. Okay, water goes down.
And
Cutscenes. Oh, is this an escort thing? Is this like an NPC that follows you? Is this person following us right now? Yeah, look at that. So that's something mechanically new in this, right? Wherever the player goes, that this NPC should also be following as well. And you can bump into the NPC. So the way this works, pretty simple. I actually was just working on a game where the whole point of the game is basically escort missions. Where essentially you have, I mean, I'd be surprised if it wasn't like this, but essentially in games what you have is navigation meshes. So like in all the levels, I wish there would be like a slightly brighter scene so I could show you a good example of this. Okay, let's just take this. So essentially what you have is in the whole world, there is, you know, floor or ground and you know, other things too. You have rocks and hills and desks and all this shit, right? But what happens eventually, somebody, I think back in the day it was more handmade, but I think eventually we got to a point where it was made a lot. There's a lot of systems that can make this programmatically, but essentially what you end up with, whether it was handmade or generated, you end up with a sort of, if you can imagine like a cut up paper with lots of folds in it. It's like a flat thing. So it's a mesh, but it's never, there's probably a word for this that I don't know, but it's never like, it never makes a full shape. It's always as if it's like a flat piece of paper thing, right? With just sort of different like heights and stuff like that. So you can imagine this room, that it might look like this. So it's like you have the edge of this wall that probably runs back here, right? Because there's a you know, wall behind her, and it actually doesn't even probably go that far. It's probably like this. So you have this, and then this, and then here's the corner of this wall, right? It goes up right here. There's the door and all that stuff right there, and this probably comes out like this, right? So all of this is the floor, right? So what ends up happening is you build a mesh that is considered, here is the walking space. So this is considered a navigation mesh. We have this in Unity, you have it in Unreal, basically all modern game engines have some form of this. And what it takes into account too is like other things. So like this is just the room, but if you take into account this desk, right, it cancels out this little area too. And it says, well, now actually the only places that you can walk in this room, let's even say this chair, right? This chair is kind of taking up space. So this spot is off limits. It would then use that as like all this blue part is where you can walk, right? And it's only on this blue part that you can walk. These parts are off limits. And so if you have an NPC that's following you, if you're doing these little escort missions, what you have is like a system that is saying, get the player's position, right? So it's like position in 3D space. So this guy, he's standing like right here, right? Here's where he's standing on that blue mesh, right? If like the point on the floor, you know, he's standing all up here, like here's his head, but the point on the floor is down here. And what it's telling her to do, would be considered like an agent, like a nav mesh agent, or at least that's what it's called in Unity. I think maybe in Unreal they call them actors or stuff or something like that. But essentially what you're saying is, hey, what you need to do is navigate this huge mesh here to get to this point, right? So this is where the player is and you want to get there. And because it's an escort mission, because it's trying to like simulate a character, it's like, don't get all the way there. Get like, you know, within a meter or two of him. So as long as she's like close enough, she'll like stop like right here, right? Or in this case, she's like fine standing, whatever, like a few meters away from him right there. But if he gets any further, then hey, go towards him again. And again, you only have this plane to navigate. And so the way you do that is by looking at this huge mesh right here. And this mesh actually, just like modeling things, is sort of like broken up into a bunch of different polygons, right? So it might look something like this. I want to say like that, something like this, right? It's a bunch of these different polygons, and where she's standing, it'll take like one of the closest points to wherever she is, and it'll say, okay, find the next point until you get there, and it'll go like this, and if he's standing all the way over here, you know, it'll go like that, right? And so her path would end up looking something like this to get to the corner of the room. So yeah, that's kind of a very simple, again, this is a very mechanically simple thing to just have an NPC following you around. And see, she seems totally fine in that room. Like, it's probably not a big enough room for her to like navigate any closer or further. But as soon as he starts going down hallways and stuff, it might change, right? Okay, skimming through this. Ooh, that's a good one. Here we go. It's so funny because I'm just fucking realizing, like, I did all of this for the horror course. I've never played this game, but I know these tropes, and it's just so crazy because like so many other games after this, right? Yeah, in the horror course, I also teach this. So this one, they give you like a full-on cursor, which is kind of funny, but this is definitely a pre-rendered image, right? This is a pre-rendered image that they have a few buttons on. So it's like there's some invisible little buttons here, right? And they all have their own corresponding numbers. And yeah, there's not much to this. Whatever the system is, right? Like if it's like, oh, you have to put in the correct password to enter this door or something. I mean, there's not much to it. It's like each button you press enters that value into like a string variable. And then when, you know, if it's a 4-digit code, then by the time you hit the 4th digit, it says, okay, now it's time to check. And if it's correct, then it'll let you in. And if it's incorrect, it'll clear your last answer and then ask you to try again. Yeah, my goodness, though. It's just a lot of reading, running around, not too much fighting. Just soaking in the vibes. Just like vibe haven. I know that that's supposed to be like an intense scene, right? It's crazy how things have changed. I think this is like the same city, right? The same little town he was in, but now it's nighttime, so it's like you don't have to worry about the fog. Instead, it's just literally like the fall off of light because he has a flashlight. So still the player's view of like how far they can see is sort of obscured. What's this? Why is this one very replayed? Oh. Guys, There's not much to break down this one, I feel. I mean, I guess that's been plenty, right? I've probably been on here for at least an hour now, right? Okay, some shotgun stuff. What did that say? I got a what? I got a can of thinner. Again, there's our little object collider pickup text thing. Skipping along, skipping along. Is this the end of it now? Like, do we spend more time watching? Okay, now you fight two of these things. Also, I imagine that this 3.5 hour runtime is being played by somebody who's like really skilled at this game and who knows how to sort of like cheat the system maybe somehow, or like who knows it well enough, because like the way they're playing it, it doesn't seem terribly challenging. Not that that's supposed to be challenging. I imagine that this game is largely about like, let's make the player feel something. But it seems exceptionally easy for this person.
Unfair it all is.
And that's it. I guess the game ends on a huge wall of text for
The
about
doctor came today.
like
He told me I could go home for a short
3:34
stay.
all the way to 3:39. So for 5 minutes you read all this text
James,
with some narration. Interesting. Yeah, I'm probably never gonna play this game, but it is really, really interesting to kind of like sit here and like go through like I guess just the cosmetics of it and to kind of soak in the vibe. I realize also that I'm sitting here in daylight. I'm talking to a camera, so it's like I'm definitely, you know, not suspending a lot of my disbelief, as you know, like the experience is probably a little tainted, right, as opposed to me sitting there and being in a dark room playing by myself with like headphones or the volume all the way up or something, right? Keep Calm and Game On says dog ending, only one canon for me. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what dog ending is. Are there multiple endings to this game? I think I did hear that. I think I remember reading that just recently, actually. I don't know too much about this game. But dog ending has piqued my curiosity. All right, so I don't know if anybody in chat has any questions about like what I think of how X, Y, or Z was done. Let me know. I'll hang on here for just a few more seconds. There is a secret dog ending running joke for the Silent Hill games. Oh, that's a weird running joke for them. Yeah, otherwise I don't know what the fuck to say. Like this was like bare bones sort of dissection. I'm curious if anybody in chat has any suggestions for what other games I should dissect and sort of break down and sort of analyze and stuff. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the chat, or you know, if you're watching this on VOD, comments on my YouTube channel, or tweet me on Twitter. I'm at Steven Scott Day, spelled the same way that you're looking at on this channel right now. I don't know how much any of y'all will like these, but what I want to do too is take this full stream, chop it up, make it a little tighter and more consumable to be viewed on YouTube. But I also want to do a few more just to test it out, because I feel like this was like this was a low bar, this episode. Silent Hill 2, I'm shocked at how minimal it is. I think it's really giving me a good understanding of like, you know, like just how minimal of a game design you can go with while still having like a really strong impact, right? Look, same thing. This thing with like entering this little key code combination. It's like the same idea as that fucking the little beep boop boop, the electronic one, except here, it just has a different cosmetic, right? It's literally just different pictures, same idea. It's slightly mechanically different because I guess it's like you have to put those in order, but like same shit. All right, well, if nobody else has any questions or anything about this, I'm gonna hop off. I hope anybody who did tune in was entertained at the very least. Hopefully learned a little something. And again, if you have any suggestions as to which games I should try to do next, just tweet me. Hit me up on Twitter. Tell me to dissect game X, Y, and Z. Or leave me a comment in the YouTubers. All right, everybody. I hope you have a really good one. Swing by the Discord, say what's up, and talk to y'all later. All right, peace, peace, peace. Where do I end this again? Do I just stop off?